This is the Homestead Journey Podcast, the podcast dedicated to the pursuit of self-sufficiency, self-reliance, and sustainability. This is episode number 71 of the Homestead Journey Podcast. Welcome, everyone. My name is Brian Wells. I am coming to you from 3B Farm and Homestead here in beautiful upstate New York. And folks, it has been a great week here on the homestead. We had a little bit of weather events. I was hoping for some more snow. Instead, we got ice. And well, at least thank God we live in a place where we know how to handle those things. Those of you who might live down in the southern part of the United States and you're dealing with the power outages and the loss of water and frozen pipes and all of those kinds of things, I do want to give a shout out to you, and I do want to let you know that my thoughts and prayers are with you. I hope that you are recovering well, that you have made it through the storm safely, and that your homestead has survived, that your animals have done well. It has definitely not been an easy week for you. Having said all of that, let's jump on over to this week's homestead happenings, and I'll bring you up to speed with what we've been doing here on 3B Farm and Homestead. On Monday this week, I finally got my chick order put together and submitted, both for our new laying hens as well as our meat birds. And they will all be arriving around the last week of March, which works out well for me because it's about 8 weeks after that we will process those chickens, the meat birds, not the layers. And so that will put us at the end of May. And that's really the optimal time for us here on our homestead to process chickens. Now, I had somebody ask me on, I think it was Instagram this week, why we started our birds so early and didn't get them out on grass over the summer. And the reason is that we have a limited amount of grass to begin with. I don't move my birds around on grass. I set up an area that's kind of in between some woods. I put down wood chips and kind of use a deep mulch method with wood chips. And so for me, there's really not that benefit of being able to move them around on fresh grass. And then if I go to process them in the summer, I'm dealing with flies and heat and all of those kinds of things. And so by starting my meat birds a little earlier and then processing them around the end of May, I try either the weekend before or the weekend after Memorial Day. And it just works out well for us. It works out well schedule-wise. The garden is starting to kick off, but I can take that weekend and process the birds. And so it just works out very, very well for us. So I got those ordered. I will be doing an episode in the future with Brian Jr. about the breeds of chickens that we'll be raising this year. So you'll definitely want to look out for that. A number of people contacted me and let me know how much they enjoyed last year's episode as we talked about the breeds that we have been raising this year on 3B Farm and Homestead. And so he will be making another appearance in the future. Other than that, the rest of the week really has been all about the garden. Now, we don't have any seeds in the ground. I take that back. I've got garlic that's been overwintering in the Ruth Stout bed. Other than that, I have no seed started. We have ice and snow out on the ground, and we will have that for the foreseeable future. Our last average frost date here is the middle of May. So it's going to be a little bit before we start getting seeds in the ground. However, this week has been a lot of planning and dreaming and scheming about the upcoming garden season. The first thing is that my Fedco seed order arrived. I was very excited about that. And my dad also actually dropped off a few packets of seeds today for me to start. So I'll be looking over those. It's a bunch of peppers. He went pepper crazy. Some sweet peppers. So some varieties I never heard of. And so we'll be giving those a go and see how they turn out for us. This week, I also had to relocate our seed starting system. Now, the seed starting system that we have usually is here in the room where I record the podcast, which is our guest bedroom, and it's usually off to my right. However, right now, due to circumstances beyond our control, we're doing a little bit of a renovation project in the master bedroom. So my wife and I are now living out of the guest bedroom, and certainly having the lights of the seed starting system coming on and off in this bedroom wasn't going to be conducive to a happy wife. And so I relocated that seed starting system actually to the basement this week. And then I thought better about it. I actually reached out to a few of the groups on Facebook and explained the situation and kind of the options that I have, whether or not it would make more sense to put the seed starting system in our great room upstairs. And most people agreed that that would be a better option. My fear in our great room is that's where our pellet stove is. And it really does get very warm in there. And it also is very, very dry. And so I was a little worried about how things are going to do as far as sprouting and whether or not the seed starting mix is going to dry out on me. But I'm going to roll the dice, and I've got some tricks up my sleeve. I may go ahead and wrap the rack in some heavy duty plastic. And anyhow, we'll see how things go, but that is the plan. And hopefully this coming week, I actually will get some seeds started, because it's that time of the year when we are going to start our onions from seed. So they need a little bit more time to get started. And so I will be starting, hopefully, onions from seed this coming week, and I will give you a full report on next week's episode. This week, I also spent quite a bit of time on growveg.com. Now, that's the garden planner that I use. I'm not affiliated at all with them. It's a $29 recurring charge, or there's some other tiers that you can buy into. I think it's well worth the money. That's just me personally. They have a 7-day trial, so you can try it out for free. Again, I make no money off of it at all, but I have just found it to be a very, very helpful tool from the standpoint of laying out the garden. And as we talked about on last week's episode, when you do that, now you know how many seeds you need to start of each type of plant or each type of crop that you are going to be raising in your garden this year. And so I spent some time this week on growveg.com. I'll be spending some more time this coming week, really refining those plans, just really getting excited about the bountiful harvest that we will achieve here on 3B Farm and Homestead in 2021. I hope this finds you well wherever you may be. I hope that you may already have some seeds in the ground or some seeds started if you are living down south. And so I hope this does find you well. If you're somebody that's been dealing with the freezing temperatures, again, my thoughts and prayers are with you. I hope you've recovered well, and I'm hoping for the best for you. Before we jump on over to this week's Charting the Course, I did want to remind you that if you are interested in supporting the show, you can do so in a number of different ways. First of all, you can support the show by sharing the show with other people. This week, there were a number of individuals that shared the show on some of the Facebook groups. They found last week's episode helpful and they shared it. And so I was really appreciative of that. You can also support the show by leaving us a review on iTunes or your favorite podcast player. That's going to help other people find the show as well. And there are a number of you who have done that over the last couple of weeks. And to you, I say a big, huge thank you very much. You can also support the show by going on over to our website, thehomesteadjourney.net/shop. There you will find a link to our t-shirt store with our fabulous designs, as well as links to various products that we use here on our homestead. Those are Amazon affiliate links. And if you buy through those, a portion of that does come back to the show and helps me keep doing what I'm doing. So I really greatly appreciate those of you who have been buying books and tools through those links. I just really greatly appreciate that. It's not just a financial thing. We don't make a lot of money off of it, but for me, it's a sense of validation that you find what I'm doing important enough that you are willing to spend some of your hard-earned dollars in supporting the show. I really appreciate it. All right, let's jump on over to this week's Charting the Course. On last week's episode, we began a 3-part series on seed starting. Last week, we talked about what to start indoors, when to start them, and how much to start. This week, we're going to move on to more of the nuts and bolts of seed starting. I've entitled this the 6 basic things you need to successfully start seeds indoors. Now, a seed starting system does not have to be complicated. Certainly, you can invest a lot of money in a seed starting system, but you don't have to. A seed starting system that is successful can simply be a windowsill, southernly facing preferably, but if you have a windowsill where you get a lot of natural daylight, it certainly can be a great place for you to start a small number of seeds. And then a seed starting system can range all the way to huge greenhouses. Obviously, for most home gardeners, that's going to be way overkill. You're going to find yourself somewhere on the lower end of the spectrum. But while you can spend a lot of money setting up a seed starting system, you certainly don't have to. And so on today's episode, we're going to talk about the 6 basic things that you need to successfully start seeds. On next week's episode, I'm going to walk you through what I do here on 3B Farm and Homestead. I will share with you some of the things that have worked for me and some of the things that haven't worked so well. And so you definitely are not going to want to miss that. So what are the 6 basic things? First of all is a seed starting mix. Secondly, are containers to hold the seed starting mix. Third is water. Fourth is light. Fifth, of course, are seeds. And then sixth is the proper environment in which seeds will most successfully germinate and grow and mature. So let's start by talking seed starting mix. If you are new to starting seeds, my recommendation is that you start by buying a high quality seed starting mix. You can find them at your big box stores, Walmart, Target, Home Depot, Lowe's. You can find them at garden centers, hardware stores. Any place that has transplants or any place that has any kind of garden equipment is probably going to carry seed starting mixes. Now, you certainly can make your own, and there are plenty of recipes on the web that will help you know what you should put into your seed starting mix. But my recommendation, if you are brand new to starting seeds, buy seed starting mix that's already put together. You're going to know that you have the right ratios of all of the ingredients, and it's really going to set you up for the best possible success in starting seeds. Now, notice I did not say soil. Most seed starting mixes do not have soil in them at all. And if they do have soil in them, it is a small part of that seed starting mix. For a variety of different reasons that I'm not going to get into on today's podcast, it is not recommended that you start seeds in garden soil or straight compost. There's just a lot of reasons why that's not a good idea. If you're somebody who's experienced with starting seeds, then you might want to roll the dice and play around with some of that. But if you're brand new to it, you really want to use a seed starting mix. And notice I didn't say potting mix or potting soil. That's a totally different thing. That's meant for seeds that have already germinated and plants that you are going to grow to maturity. So you don't want potting soil. You want a seed starting mix. Whether you make it your own or whether you buy it, that's totally up to you. But definitely not garden soil, not straight compost, and not a potting mix. The next thing that you want to think about are the containers that you are going to use to hold your seed starting mix. Now, I kind of break these down into 4 different areas. First of all would be your homemade or your repurposed items, things like toilet paper tubes or pots that you can make from newspaper strips, yogurt containers, tin cans, egg cartons, Dixie cups, solo cups, and I even see some people who start seeds in eggshells. The second category of containers would be your single-use seed starting containers. Now, if you have bought transplants before at a nursery or at Lowe's or Home Depot, those flimsy 6-packs or those flimsy 3-inch or 4-inch pots are what I'm talking about. Those are things that are designed really for a single use. Now, can you use them over and over again? Certainly you can if you are careful. There are people who will use them multiple times, but they do quickly break down. They are very weak, they are flimsy, and eventually they're going to crack and degrade. They're certainly not optimized to be used multiple times. You can also find seed starting kits at Walmart and Home Depot and Lowe's that have your seed starting mix and some containers, some trays. Some of them come with little peat plugs that are about the size of maybe $0.50 that when you wet them, they kind of expand and you can put the seeds into those and then you plant those right into the ground. And then there are also some other single-use containers that are made out of organic material like peat or cow manure. And the idea behind those is that you fill them with seed starting mix, you start the seeds in there, and then when it is time to transplant them into the ground, you plant them pot and all into the ground, and that pot goes ahead and degrades into the soil, and it actually provides nutrients to the soil. The third category of container would be your reusable trays. Now, these would be generally made out of a higher quality plastic, and they are designed to be used over and over and over and over again. You may remember that last year I ordered some of those from Haas Tools. I trialed them out with various levels of successes, but they do look in some instances very similar in size and shape to the reusable plug trays that you can buy at, again, the garden centers. They are just designed to be used for many, 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 many years. You can also find them, or you used to be able to find them, made out of styrofoam. Charles Dowding on his channel on YouTube has some that he's had, I think, since the 80s. But styrofoam certainly has fallen out of favor, and I'm not sure whether or not you can buy those. Most of the reusable trays are made out of a high density recycled plastic. They're really, really rigid and are designed to be used year in and year out. The last container, and I'm calling it a container, it's not really a container, but the last vehicle in which you can start seeds would be soil blocks. And soil blocks are just as the name implies. They are blocks that you make of soil using a special soil block maker. The soil block maker, think of it as a cookie cutter. You pre-moisten your seed mix and you press the soil block maker down into that seed mix. There's a plunger that you depress and out pops your soil blocks. I'm not sure if these were invented by Elliot Coleman, but he is certainly the one that has popularized them. And so they are certainly a viable option for starting seeds. They come in, I think, three sizes, at least three sizes that I'm aware of: a very small 1 1/4 size, a 2-inch block, and then a 4-inch block. Now, in my opinion, for home gardeners, all you need are the 2-inch blocks. If you start things on the proper schedule, the 2-inch blocks are going to work well for just about anything that you want to grow, and you're not going to need to worry about potting things up. So the 2-inch soil block maker is certainly what I would recommend you look at if you are interested in going that route. The variety of different containers all have their pluses and minuses. The homemade and repurposed objects certainly are using things that you potentially already have on hand. You might want to hold on to your toilet paper tubes all year long. You flip them up on end, you put them in a container, fill them with soil, and you can start seeds in them. Yogurt containers, tin cans, red Solo cups, Dixie cups, all of those things are things that you might have used throughout the year, and you might hold on to them and then you reuse them in order to be able to start your seeds. So in essence, this could be a very environmentally friendly approach to starting seeds. Also, you're not investing in anything because these are things that you already bought, you already have on hand. But there can be downsides to the repurposed and homemade. So the first downside is that they can be flimsy. If you're using toilet paper tubes or newspaper, those can get wet and disintegrate, fall apart. And so just keep that in mind. It can also be time consuming. If you're making the pots out of newspaper strips, you've got to have time to do that. And for many of us, time is our most precious commodity. And so that may be a downside to you as well. Another downside to those homemade or repurposed seed starting containers is that they have a tendency to be quite a bit bigger than your standard 6-packs, for example. And so you're not going to be able to fit as many starts into your seed starting system as you otherwise might be if you went with the single use or even reusable seed starting containers. And because they're not optimized for seed starting, they do take, or they can take, more seed starting mix than a standard plug tray. If you stop and you think about the size of a red Solo cup as compared to a traditional 6-pack, both the amount of space that the red Solo cup is going to take in a seed starting system, as well as the amount of seed starting mix that it's going to take, it's just going to be quite a bit more, and it's certainly not going to be as efficient as using a regular plug tray. On the flip side, they can also be, in my opinion, too small. So egg cartons, while they look cute on Pinterest, and eggshells, while they look cute on Pinterest, that's really, in my opinion, not enough seed starting mix whereby your plants are going to be able to generate a healthy root structure so that when you transplant them out into your garden, they're going to be able to thrive. Now, there are certain things that you might be able to start in those that might work out well, but things like your tomatoes and your peppers, things that we commonly start in those plug trays and so forth, in my opinion, the egg cartons, the eggshells, it's just way too small. Another downside to using the repurposed containers, such as yogurt containers or tin cans or Dixie cups or red Solo cups, is that your seedlings can become what we refer to as root bound. And what that means is that the roots start spiraling around on the inside of the container, and they become just kind of this gnarled mess. And it really does make it difficult for them to reestablish themselves out in the garden when you transplant them. Finally, if you are reusing things like tin cans or yogurt cups, things that you might normally recycle, if you are using them for seed starting, probably they're going to become so dirty that you're not going to be able to recycle them, and you're going to need to discard them or throw them out. They're going to have to go to the landfill. Now, the single-use seed starting containers have a lot of benefits. First of all, they're optimized for size and quantity. So they're going to use the proper amount of seed starting mix that your plants are going to need. They're going to be optimized to really help you fit in the most number of starts in your seed starting system. The seed starting pucks and the seed starting kits that you can find, again, Lowe's, Home Depot, Walmart, those kinds of places, are really great for novice seed starters. It's kind of, I don't want to call it dummy proof, but they really give you all that you need to really successfully start seeds. And then the idea behind the biodegradable pots that I talked about, the peat pots or the cow pots, is that they can be transplanted right into the ground, which reduces transplant shock. But certainly there are a lot of downsides to the single-use items. The plastic is flimsy, and so you have to be very careful when you move them, when you fill them, that you don't crush them. And you just really can't get a lot of uses out of them. Yes, you might be able to get 2, maybe 3 uses out of them, but they are going to break down. They're going to split. They're going to crack. And the last thing you want is to get your seeds started and then go to move them, have them crack, and lose your seedlings all over the ground. That would just frustrate the tar right out of me. Another thing is that the peat pots and the cow pots aren't cheap. There certainly is an expense to utilizing those. And so you just need to keep that in mind. That may become a part of your seed starting budget, your garden budget, but certainly it is not the most economical, the cheapest way to start the seeds. And finally, just like with the yogurt containers or the tin cans or the Solo cups, seeds that you start in these single-use plastic trays can get root bound, again, leading to transplant shock. As we think about the reusable plug trays, the reusable 1020 trays, a huge benefit to them is that you can reuse them over and over and over and over again. especially these injected molded plastic ones. They are virtually indestructible. In fact, Travis over at Hoss Tools has a video of where he puts one on the ground and jumps up and down on it. So they are very durable. And because they are durable, they are easy to fill and they're easy to move around. Some of them actually are designed to air prune the roots, or they have little ridges in them, little ribs inside of them, which are designed to cause the roots to grow down. And so what that's going to do is it's going to reduce the tendency of the plant to become root bound, and it's going to help it develop a very healthy root structure. These reusable seed starting trays are also optimized for the proper amount of soil for certain vegetables that you're going to start in them. And they're optimized to really give you the most bang for your buck in your seed starting system, where you can really start the most number of transplants in the area that you have to work with. But they certainly have downsides as well. The first one being cost. They are not cheap. When you buy these seed starting trays, it is an investment. And so keep that in mind. Over the long haul, over many, many years, certainly in my opinion, they will pay for themselves, but they are not cheap to start out. They are also not always optimized for the quantities that a home gardener would need. So for example, last year from Hoss Tools, I bought one of their 162 cell seed starting trays. I'll say that 10 times fast. But this seed starting tray will hold 162 transplants. But how many of us start 162 tomatoes or 162 peppers or 162 of anything at one whack? Most of us don't. Last year, what I tried doing was starting tomatoes and peppers, both in there. The problem is that tomatoes and peppers have different germination times. They have different growth rates. And so as my tomatoes grew, they outgrew my peppers. And with my lights having to raise them up to accommodate the tomatoes, my peppers got a little bit spindly, a little bit leggy because they were trying to catch up to the light. So keep that in mind. Bigger isn't always better in this case. Keep in mind that some of them are also not designed to air prune or to train the roots to grow down. I also purchased one of the 48 cell seed starting kits from Hoss Tools last year. And while it's very, very rigid plastic and probably will last for many, many years, it has the same problem that a single-use seed starting tray would have, and that is that the potential for the plants becoming root bound is a very real possibility. The last thing are the soil blocks. Now, a great thing about the soil blocks is there is minimal to no plastic needed to make soil blocks and to use soil blocks. If that's something that is of concern to you, soil blocks may be the way that you want to go. You can make wooden trays, put the soil blocks in them, and be very successful in starting seeds. The soil block makers are also virtually indestructible. So you buy them once, you're going to have them for years and years and years, many years of use. You're just buying a seed starting mix or making a seed starting mix. Elliot Coleman has a recipe that is really optimized for making soil blocks. And so you buy the soil block maker, you have your trays, and you will get many, many years of making soil blocks to start your seeds. One of the other huge benefits of the soil blocks is that your roots are air pruned. What that means is when the roots reach out to the edge of the soil block, they reach air, they stop growing. And what that does is it causes the roots to start sending off more roots. And so it really helps develop a healthy root system, but the roots aren't growing around and around and around in circles and becoming root bound. And then when you plant them into the soil, those roots that have reached out to the end, they say, oh, great, I can continue to grow. And then they will grow and you are going to reduce transplant shock. But there are also downsides to soil blocks. If you are using wooden trays, they don't last long and they're not optimal for use in an indoor seed starting system that you might have in your kitchen or on your windows, because they might leak all over the place. And certainly, again, happy wife, happy life, right? So this means that you might need to invest in 1020 trays. And again, if plastic is of concern to you, you're using plastic in the 1020 trays. Now you can buy very, very high quality 1020 trays from Bootstrap Farmer. I highly recommend them. You will get many, many years of use out of them. But again, it is utilizing plastic. And if that's something that is of concern to you, keep that in mind. Another downside to soil blocks is that it is labor intensive. It does take a bit of time to get the consistency of the seed starting mix correct. And then making the soil blocks is a bit of a time consuming process. And it's also not the best use of space in a seed starting system if you are disciplined. Now, I have not always been disciplined. And so what I try to do is cram rows of 5 into a 1020 tray. But when you do that, you start losing the benefits of the air pruning, because everything starts getting smushed together, and then the seedling starts growing its roots into the next seedling. And so when you go to plant them, you're having to break them apart, and it does cause some shock to those plants. So the best thing is just to put a row of 4 in a 1020 tray. When you look at it though, you feel like, man, I'm wasting a lot of space here. So if you are trying to maximize the amount of space in your seed starting system, then soil blocks may not be the best option. At least the 2-inch blocks may not be the best option for you. Now, certainly all of those containers are viable options for starting seeds. Some of it's just going to be a matter of personal preference. Some of it's going to be a matter of how much money you want to invest. Some of it's going to be a matter of your beliefs with regards to plastics and so on and so forth. All of them have pluses. All of them have minuses. On next week's episode, I will share with you what I do here on 3B Farm and Homestead. I've already kind of given you a little bit, a sneak preview, so to speak. And I'll also share with you some of the things that I did not find as successful. So after we've talked about seed starting mix, we've talked about containers, let's move on to water. Now with water, you're really looking for a delicate balance. You don't want things to get too dried out. That's going to lead to poor germination rates, but you don't want things to be saturated and soggy. Saturated and soggy will lead to seed rot. It's going to lead to disease, mold, algae buildup. It's just not going to be a healthy environment for your seeds to start. So that's why having a good seed starting mix is very important, because a good seed starting mix is going to drain the water that it doesn't need, but it's going to absorb the water and hold on to the water that it does need. And so it's going to really help you have the optimal situation for successfully starting seeds. So when it comes to watering your seed starting system, in my opinion, the best thing to do is to water from the bottom, not to water from the top, which means to simply pour water into the bottom of the container, which will allow the seed starting mix to kind of act like the wick in a kerosene lantern and kind of draw up into the cell or the block the amount of water that it needs. But you're not going to end up with a saturated, muddy, nasty mess. So not only do you need a good seed starting mix and a container and water, but the next thing you're going to need is light. Now, some people will tell you that if you are not using natural light, like a greenhouse or a windowsill, then you need to invest in high quality and very expensive grow light LED lights. I'm going to tell you right now, that's hogwash. Unless you're planning on growing the plants to full maturity and then having them produce fruit inside, so maybe tomatoes inside or peppers, you only need a regular fluorescent light or even a cheap LED shop light that you can buy at Walmart. I actually, in my seed starting system, have a mixture of old fluorescent shop lights that have been wired to fit a plug. And I also have some of those cheap LED lights that I bought at Walmart for, I think, less than $20 each. And again, I'll share more about that on next week's episode. On Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace, I have seen people giving away fluorescent lights. As fluorescent lights have kind of fallen out of favor, I have seen people giving them away. So keep an eye out there. You may be able to score them for free. And if it's for free, it's for me. This week, as I was preparing for this episode, I saw someone on a Facebook group mention a 6-pack of 4 feet long LED lights that they found on Amazon for less than $50. So I'm going to go ahead and link to that set in the show notes if you want to check them out. I'm not going to include this on our thehomesteadjourney.net/shop page because I don't use them. I don't know whether or not they work well or not. And right now I don't need additional LED lights. But if I were building a seed starting system, I would consider buying them. And the reason being is that because if you have a 6-pack of lights, that's enough for 3 shelves in a seed starting system like what I have. If I were to go out and buy 6 LED lights from Walmart, even though they're less than $20 a piece, you're still talking over $100 for those lights. So potentially those lights from Amazon could cost you less than half of that. So check that out if you're interested. I can't guarantee that they'll work as well as the lights I use, but it's certainly something to keep in mind. And if you do try those lights out, I would appreciate it if you give me a shout, Brian at thehomesteadjourney.net. Let me know how you make out, whether or not they worked well for you, whether or not they didn't, and then I can pass that information on to other listeners. But anyhow, back to the light. Now, you do not need light for most things for the seeds to germinate. There are a few things that do require light to germinate, but most things don't require light to germinate. When you need the light is after those seedlings start peeking up through the soil. At that point, what you need to do is have the light be about an inch above the seedling. And then as the seedling grows, you gradually raise the lights up. Now, this is really, really important. If you keep your lights too low, then what's going to happen is the seedlings are going to reach the light and then stop growing. They're going to be stunted. But if you keep the lights too high, the seedlings are going to try to race to the light, and they are going to end up being very, very spindly and not healthy. We call that leggy plants. So you want to keep those lights about an inch above those seedlings, and then as they grow, you gradually raise them. Now, optimally, your seedlings are going to need about 12 to 16 hours of light every day. And so, in my opinion, a key part of your seed starting system is going to be a timer. And again, we'll talk more about that next week, the timers that I use, but that will turn your lights on at the right time. It'll turn the lights off at the right time. And it will make sure that your seeds get the proper amount of light every day. So not only do you need a good seed starting mix and containers and water and light, but you need seeds. Now, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about seeds on this episode. Back on episode 7, I talked about where you should get your seeds. On last week's episode, episode 70, we talked about what, when, and how much you should start. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about seeds, but you really do want to use a high quality seed, something that's not been sitting around for years and years and years. Although you don't need to buy seed every year. Certain seeds will store better than others. And we could do a whole episode on that. So I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole too far, but certainly you want to make sure you are using a high quality seed for the best germination rates possible. The last thing we're going to talk about is the environment. When I was initially thinking about this episode, I was only going to include the first 5 things. But as I got to thinking about it, you can have great seed starting mix, great containers, good water and light and high quality seeds. But if the environment is wrong, you will have poor seed starting success. If it's too cold, you're going to see poor germination rates. If it's too hot, that could stress the seedlings and cause them to dry out and die. If it's too humid or wet, you could end up with dampening off disease or algae or seed rot. And if it's too dry, the seeds will not germinate properly. So optimal temperatures for seed starting are going to range between 65 and 75 degrees. Some things like tomatoes and peppers like things a bit warmer. So you might want to use a heat mat with them. But if you keep things at the higher end of that range, 70 to 75 degrees, they might take a little longer to germinate, but they certainly should germinate fine. So what you might want to think about is taking things that prefer cooler temps for germination, like your cole crops, for example, and put them lower in your seed starting system, and then put your tomatoes and peppers higher in your seed starting system since heat rises. So use the properties of heat to your advantage. Things that like cooler temperatures a little lower, things that like warmer temperatures a little bit higher. I also will include a link in the show notes to botanicalinterest.com. There they have a really great article on the soil temperatures that seeds like. Most seed packets will have the temperatures on them. This is the sweet pepper that my dad gave me today, and it says seedlings emerge at 10 to 21 days at 75 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. I will include that link to botanicalinterest.com just so you have that as a resource. Now, again, next week, I'm going to walk you through my seed starting process, including the growing medium that I use, what containers, as well as my entire seed starting setup, including the racks, the lights, etc. I'll try to put together a list of links to the products that I use that you can purchase. Some of those will be affiliate links. Some of them will be simply links to the products wherever I can find them, because at the end of the day, my goal is for you to be successful in starting seeds this year for your garden. If you have any questions or comments, or if you disagree with anything that I've said, please reach out to me. You can reach me via email, brian@thehomesteadjourney.net, or you can also reach us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. The links to all of our social media accounts are in the show notes. As always, the music on today's episode was provided by audionautics.com, so a big shout out to them. And until next time, everybody, keep up the good work.